On the evening of May 13th, 2008, 19-year-old Brandon joined his classmates to celebrate the end of their academic year at the Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby. He was seen at 2 different parties, having a good time in the company of his friends. He had a few drinks, but not enough to get him intoxicated, well, according to his friends. A few minutes before midnight, Brandon bade his friends goodbye, got into his car, and began the 3-mile 48 km drive back home. This had been his daily routine for the past few months, and today shouldn't have been any different. Except on this day, he chose to drive on the back roads instead of the main highway between Canby and Marshall. What prompted this decision remains unclear, but many think that he chose to take the longer graveled road to avoid being pulled over by the cops for DI. Anyway, at some point he accidentally veered off the road and ran his car into a ditch, stuck on a somewhat lonely road in the dead of the night. At first he tried calling his friends for help, but none of them answered his calls. Left with no choice, Brandon called his parents around 1:45 a.m., telling them his car had run into a ditch somewhere near the town of Lind. He wasn't hurt, but he needed help moving the car or getting home that night. Without hesitation, his parents decided to go get their son. As they approached where Brandon said he was, they called him to flash his headlights so that they wouldn't miss him. He did as told, but they saw nothing. While still on the phone, they also started flashing their headlights and honking to signal their approach and asked him to do the same. Brandon did as he was told, but neither of them saw the other's lights or heard the horns. Walk. Brandon, getting increasingly frustrated and impatient, told his parents that he could see some lights in the distance, indicating that the small town of Lind was up ahead. So instead of waiting, he'd walk over there. He asked them to meet him at the parking lot of a local bar in Lind. During his walk, his parents maintained contact with him on his phone. At some point, he told his parents that he was passing a shortcut that led to Lind. As he walked, he mentioned that there were several fences up there, and he could hear the sound of running water nearby. About 47 minutes into his walk, they suddenly heard him yell, "Oh shit," and everything suddenly went silent. The phone was still connected, so they started yelling into their phone, asking him what had happened, but all they got was silence. Thinking that the reception signal was poor, Brandon's parents ended the call and redialed the number. Only this time, no one picked the call. The phone went unanswered no matter how many times they called, but they didn't stop. The way the call ended abruptly was rather unsettling, and up till daybreak, they tried contacting all his friends and their own neighbors to help locate him. Around 6:30 a.m., after calling his phone endlessly, with no answers, they decided to contact the police. But the police weren't exactly keen on initiating an immediate search operation. According to them, it wasn't unusual for boys his age to stay out all night after the last day of college, and he was probably drunk and passed out somewhere with a group of friends. One of the officers even said it was Brandon's right to be missing, and they couldn't initiate a search until 24 hours after his disappearance. Brandon's parents, not expecting such a cold response from the police, refused to wait until 24 hours. They pulled all of their resources and soon got in touch with the sheriff, who ordered an immediate search and rescue operation. The search. Around 12:45 p.m. that day, the police were finally able to locate Brandon's car by using his phone records to track where his last phone calls came from. The car was discovered near Taunton, about 25 miles away from where he thought he was, and it was, as he said, stuck in a ditch. The car's doors were open and the keys missing, but there was no damage or evidence of foul play. The only thing they found suspicious were the glasses they found in his car. Brandon was legally blind in one eye and couldn't see clearly without his glasses on. So it didn't make sense that he'd be driving without them, or even walking in the dark half-blind. Police search dogs and air surveillance were brought in to search the surrounding areas, and after a while, volunteers from the local community joined the search. One of the dogs tracked Brandon's scent to the bank of the Yellow Medicine River, which was only 6 miles from where his car was found. This gave them the idea that Brandon may have slipped into the river and drowned. Boats were immediately deployed along the river to conduct an underwater search, but nothing was found. This part of the river was only about 10 feet deep, so there wouldn't have been any problem locating his body or any of his belongings in the water. As days rolled into weeks, the idea that Brandon had drowned was soon ruled out, especially as his phone was still on and ringing 2 days after his disappearance. If he had indeed drowned with the phone, there was a higher chance that it would have been damaged as a result of being submerged underwater, and the incoming calls would have gone directly to voicemail with no rings. The search soon extended to the fields Brandon mentioned while he was on his phone with his father. Without his glasses on, the officers considered the possibility of him stumbling into a hidden well or unmarked cistern. The search went on for months, and even cadaver dogs were brought in to find his remains, but they found no sign of him. Neither did they ever recover his cell phone. By December 2008, the police had covered over 122 km of the search area, but nothing was ever found. The dogs had also traced his scent to a farm machinery, but the farmer refused to allow police search dogs on his farm. The search was eventually called off and Brandon was officially declared missing. In the absence of any official conclusion, many started to come up with theories to explain Brandon's mysterious disappearance. Theories. One of the leading theories was that Brandon was actually intoxicated, and his friends had only lied out of fear of getting into trouble. He could have been driving under the influence of alcohol, or even drugs. Perhaps he had tried something at the party which made him take the back roads to avoid getting in trouble with the police. The effect of the drugs or alcohol was what made him forget to put on his glasses, and also drive himself into a ditch. Still disoriented, he wandered into the woods instead of keeping to the side of the roads where he would be easily seen and picked up. Although this seems very possible, his parents have absolutely rejected this theory, claiming that their son didn't sound suspicious when they were on the phone with him. Another theory that seemed to hold water was that he fell into a swamp or an unmarked cistern that he didn't see until it was too late. That would explain the sudden "oh shit" followed by his silence. If he was attacked by, say, a bear or other wild animals, there is a higher chance that his parents would have heard his screams in the background. Many also suspected the owner of the farm equipment that Brandon's scent was traced to. Perhaps he had accidentally run over Brandon with a heavy farm machine and hurriedly buried him to avoid criminal charges. That would explain why he refused to allow search dogs on his property. But this still didn't explain the silence after Brandon's last statement. His parents would have possibly heard screams or noise coming from some type of vehicle at the very least, but all they got was sudden silence. It was also suggested that Brandon may have faked his own disappearance, but this was criticized by his parents. Brandon had no reason to do that. He was a bright young man with an even brighter future ahead of him, and not once did he ever mention or show any signs of depression. His credit card records also showed no recent activity since the day he went missing. Since Brandon's disappearance in 2008, the police have received countless tips and information about him, but none has led to successfully unraveling the mystery behind his disappearance. His parents, left with the haunting reality of not knowing what happened to their son, continue to leave their porch lights on with hopes that their son would one day come back home to them. Brandon's law. Perhaps the only good thing about his case was the passing of Brandon's law 1 year after his disappearance. The law advocated by Brandon's parents requires authorities to immediately look into reports of missing persons regardless of their age. His parents believed that waiting until 24 hours before initiating a search would only result in precious time being wasted. Even though this didn't help their son's case, they knew that the law would help other families when looking for their loved ones. For Brandon, it's been over 15 years since his disappearance. We may never know whether he died that night or he is alive, living as someone else.